Ever get that feeling, that
Yeah.
you should be doing something, but then Netflix calls your name?
Oh, tell me about it. Happens to the best of us.
Right. But today we're tackling that head on. We're doing a deep dive into discipline, but not the usual kind. We're going deep with Raymond Samso and his book, El Poder de la Disciplina. That's The Power of Discipline.
Ah, Samso. I've been meaning to check that out. It's the one about, actually enjoying discipline.
Exactly. It's about making discipline work for you, not against you.
Yeah.
Especially for those of us who want to get things done, but, without turning into robots.
Sign me up. So where do we start?
Well, Samso throws out the old force yourself approach. He says discipline isn't about restrictions. It's about aligning with what we actually love.
So less, I have to do this.
Yeah.
More, I want to do this.
That's interesting. Right. He says when we're genuinely passionate, the effort feels less like work and more like, I don't know, maybe even self-care.
Okay, now you're speaking my language. So how do we tap into that?
Well, he uses this analogy of discipline being like a muscle, which I kind of love.
A muscle. Like the more you work it, the stronger it gets.
Exactly. Every time we make a conscious choice that aligns with our goals, even something small, we're strengthening that discipline muscle.
So no need to wait for a sudden burst of willpower.
Nope. In fact, he's all about consistency over intensity. Small, sustainable habits, he calls them mini habits, rather than relying on willpower, which, let's face it, can be pretty unreliable.
That makes a lot of sense. Speaking of consistency, I remember you mentioning Samso is big on routines.
Oh, absolutely. This is a guy who streamlines almost everything in his life, from what he wears to his daily schedule. And you know how you've been struggling with decision fatigue lately?
Don't even get me started. It's like my brain short circuits by lunchtime.
Samso says that by simplifying his wardrobe and routines, it actually frees up his mental energy for the things that truly matter to him. Like writing, for example.
Huh. So it's not about being restrictive, it's about being more efficient.
Exactly. It's about clearing the mental clutter so you can focus on what you love. Okay, but one thing that really struck me was how Samso connects discipline to love, of all things.
Love. That's an interesting combo. I don't usually associate those two.
Right, but he actually says that true discipline, like the really powerful kind, comes from love, not obligation.
Okay. Where does he even start with that?
He has this whole equation. Discipline equals unconditional love plus passion plus surrender.
Surrender. Now that's throwing me for a loop.
I know, it sounds kind of counterintuitive, right? But I think what he's getting at is that when we're truly passionate about something, it doesn't feel like forcing ourselves,
Yeah, okay, I see that. Like when you get so absorbed in something, you lose track of time. It just flows.
Exactly. And it ties back to that discipline muscle idea. The more we do things out of love and excitement, the less we have to rely on just pure willpower.
Which we've already established is not always there when you need it.
Exactly. This whole idea really speaks to me, especially because, I don't know about you, but I can be such a perfectionist sometimes. I get stuck waiting for the perfect time to start something new.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that too.
But Samso seems to be all about action, not overthinking.
Right. Like dive in and figure it out as you go.
Exactly. He even says that we should try to reframe difficult things as interesting or motivating. It's like a little mental trick, but it can totally change your perspective.
It's like choosing to see the challenge instead of getting overwhelmed by it.
Right. Speaking of challenges, Samso is also a big believer in pushing our boundaries, getting comfortable with being a little uncomfortable. He even says we should, purposely put ourselves in a bind sometimes.
Well, when on purpose.
I know, it sounds kind of crazy, right? But he believes that's how we grow, by stepping outside of our comfort zones.
Yeah.
He actually used his own story as an example. He left a really secure job to pursue his passion, which is writing.
Wow, that takes guts. Isn't that also where his franchising from God idea comes in? You mentioned that earlier.
Oh, yes. I almost forgot. It's such a unique phrase.
It is. So what does he mean by that exactly?
Well, it's like, imagine feeling so connected to your work that it feels like a calling, something bigger than yourself.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I can kind of see that.
He believes that when we align our actions with a purpose that's greater than ourselves, that's when we can really tap into a different level of motivation, discipline, all of it.
It's like we're tapping into this endless well of energy and inspiration.
Yes, exactly. And he uses the franchising analogy to show that it's not about being a follower, but about taking that inspiration and creating something amazing with it. This is really making me think, about how I approach my goals. It's like instead of getting bogged down by the how, maybe it's more about connecting with that deeper why. But it's easy to get inspired, right? Actually
Mhm.
putting it all into practice, that's the tricky part.
Oh, for sure. Inspiration's the fun part. It's the action that trips a lot of us up.
Exactly. So for people listening who are like, okay, I'm ready to embrace some of the Samso wisdom, what's a good first step?
Well, Samsel has this thing he calls the 24-hour rule, which I think is brilliant in its simplicity.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's pretty straightforward, really. He says, whenever you have one of those aha moments, any kind of inspiration or realization, you've got to take action on it within 24 hours.
Ooh, I like that. Don't let it fade away, strike while the iron's hot kind of thing.
Precisely. Because we both know how easy it is for those good intentions to just kind of fizzle out.
Oh, all too well. Speaking of taking action, Samso's own writing process is a great example of this. He talks about how he doesn't always start at the beginning and work linearly. He jumps around, starts from different points, kind of reverse engineers the whole thing.
Right. He's all about embracing the nonlinear path, which I think is so refreshing. It's like he's giving us permission to experiment and figure things out as we go. Kind of like we were saying earlier, not getting stuck in the how.
Totally. Okay, but we can't talk about discipline without addressing the, shall we say, less glamorous side of it. Because let's face it, discipline isn't always fun in games. Remember how Samso talks about putting ourselves in a bind?
Yeah, that one definitely raised an eyebrow for me. Sounds a little intense, I have to say.
It does. But I think what he's getting at is that real growth rarely happens within our comfort zones, right?
Yeah.
We've got to push those boundaries, embrace the challenges, even when they're a little uncomfortable.
It's like that saying, no pain, no gain, right?
Mhm.
But hopefully less painful, more just stretching ourselves a bit.
Exactly. It's about recognizing those moments of discomfort as opportunities for growth, not roadblocks to be avoided.
And I think that's where self-awareness comes in. Simso talks about really tuning into why we're resisting something. Is it fear of failure? Fear of judgment? Once we understand those internal barriers, we can start to work with them, you know?
Instead of just getting swept away by them.
Exactly. And here's where Samso takes it to a whole other level. He suggests we actually wish for a crisis.
Wait, what? Who wishes for a crisis?
I know, right? Sounds a little crazy at first, but he's not talking about actual, disasters or anything. He's talking about those moments of positive disruption, the things that shake us out of our routines and force us to grow in ways we never expected.
Okay, so less wishing for bad things to happen and more about being open to the unexpected.
Exactly. Because sometimes those unexpected challenges, those crises, can lead to the most incredible breakthroughs.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the power of discipline, with a little help from Raymond Samso, I think the key takeaway here is that it's not about forcing ourselves into a rigid box. It's about aligning our actions with our values, our passions, that bigger why that drives us. It's about embracing discomfort as a catalyst for growth, pushing past those limiting beliefs, and maybe even wishing for a crisis or two along the way. Who knows what amazing things might unfold.